This. No. I won't. I won't let you. Ray of negative energy. A beam of black light shone extended from Khajiit's hand and touched the skeletal dragon, quickly healing its injuries with negative energy. So it's immune to magic, but it can be healed with magic. Khajiit ignored Narbrel's mockery, and continued casting spells. Reinforce armor, lesser strength, undead flame, shield wall. He cast buff after buff on the skeletal dragon. Now the skeletal dragon's bony body was sturdier, stronger, and wreathed in life-draining black fire. It even had an invisible barrier in front of it which acted like a shield. Well, if you're doing that, I'll play along. Reinforce armor, shield wall, protection energy negative. Narbrel layered defensive spells on herself as well. Once both sides had finished buffing themselves, it was as if a bell had gone off and the two of them went at it again. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. Narbrel swung her sword. She landed a forceful hit on the skeletal dragon's foreleg, but then Narbrel furrowed her brows. Although she could easily strike her opposition like just she had earlier, this was hardly a good matchup for her. She was not skilled at melee combat, and her weapon was not suitable for it either. The skeletal dragon was made of an assembly of bones, so piercing and slashing weapons did very little damage to it. However, Narbrel did not have bludgeoning weapons, which were ideal for the task, so she had to resort to using her sheath. Although she had the advantage, the poor balance of the improvised weapon meant she could not effectively damage the skeletal dragon. Perhaps a specialized warrior might have been able to maintain his balance, but Narbrel was a magic caster, and did not know how to do so. The skeletal dragon's forepaw swiped over the crouching Narbrel. Though it missed her with its kick, the black flames wreathing its limbs washed over Narbrel. However, she resisted them with the protection energy negative spell, and the black flames vanished without a trace. If she had not protected herself, she would probably have been hurt by the additional effects of the blow even if she had avoided it. Ray of negative energy. Khajiit healed the skeletal dragon's wounds with a magic ray. This was also one of the reasons why Narbrel was frowning. No matter how much damage she did, Khajiit the backliner immediately healed it all. She knew she had to attack Khajiit first, but the skeletal dragon between Narbrel and Khajiit did not permit her to do so. Even a piercing spell like lightning would be stopped by the skeletal dragon's magic immunity. The area effect spell Electrosphere would also be stopped by Khajiit's defensive magic, its damage reduced to insignificance. Then, perhaps by using an enchantment-type spell, she could force him to lower his defenses, and win the encounter in one stroke. Charm person. Mind of Undeath. Narbrel and Khajiit cast their spells at the same time. Narbrel directed a spell which would charm humans at Khajiit, while Khajiit cast a defensive spell on himself which protected him from mind-affecting spells. In the end, Khajiit smiled triumphantly, while Narbrel frowned and clicked her tongue. Perhaps she had been distracted by Khajiit's smile, but a shadow appeared over Narbrel's face. A white object filled Narbrel's field of vision. She would be hard-pressed to avoid it. She deftly ducked her head and braced the tip of her sword against her shoulder, turning her sword into a shield. The impact spread through her sword arm and the shoulder, which took the blow, practically numbing her entire body, and tossing Narbrel's body into the air. This was the result of the skeletal dragon aiming a tail swipe at her face. Oh ho ho. Though her balance had been broken, Narbrel had not fallen down, her legs skillfully braced against the impact. Still, she had been driven back. This was a good chance for a follow-up attack, but the skeletal dragon remained where it was. Its job was to protect Khajiit, and so it could not stray too far from him. After sensing this from the skeletal dragon, Narbrel shook her hands to clear off the numbness and soreness. Just then, Khajiit poked his head out from behind the skeletal dragon. Acid javelin. Lightning. Khajiit launched a green, spear-like object that streaked towards Narbrel's body. The javelin, which should have dealt her acid damage, stopped several centimeters away from Narbrel's body, and vanished without a trace. At the same time, the lightning bolt Narbrel shot from her fingers was blocked by the skeletal dragon's tail and fizzled out. Khajiit and Narbrel glared at each other. A defensive spell? How annoying. That should be my line, you inferior life form, bagworm moth. How about coming out from behind there and facing me fair and square? And why do I have to come out? Doesn't staying here ruin your plans? Khaziit knew that Narbril had his number and narrowed his eyes. Narbril smiled nonchalantly. It can't be helped. After making his decision, Khaziit clutched the strange sphere and raised it to the heavens. Now behold the power of the Orb of Death. The earth trembled, and Narbril's body shook as well. This was a sign that something big was coming. A massive fissure appeared in the ground, and a white monster slowly revealed itself. Another one. Humph. The negative energy's depleted now, but after I kill you and your friend, I can spread death throughout the city and recover it all. Khaziit's shouting was angry and emotional, in contrast to the unfazed Narbril. Hiya. Narbril forcefully exhaled, then sprinted forward with preternatural speed. Khaziit was taken by surprise and could not react in time. The skeletal dragons stomped at Narbril, who had entered their attack range, with their forelegs. Narbril turned and evaded the stomp of the skeletal dragon on her right, but the other one was waiting for her. It swept its tail along the ground, like it was going to scythe the grass. The tail which had nearly hit her thundered through the air in front of Narbril, as she leapt a long way back. Then, the tail suddenly changed its direction, swinging down on Narbril, who had just jumped clear. Narbril avoided the earth-shaking blow from the left, but the skeletal dragon on the right swiped its forepaw at her as well. Goo! She raised her sword to block the skeletal dragon's swipe. Although the paw's crushing pressure was extraordinary, Narbril still stood strong underneath it, and even forced it away. The right-side skeletal dragon stumbled several steps back, causing a brief lull in the action. What are you? Blocking it without martial arts, how did you learn to do that? It is because I was created by the ones who are greater than the gods, the supreme beings. Are you kidding me? Even if you knew the truth, you would never understand, and to think you would go so far as to call me, one who spoke the name of the supreme beings, an idiot. This is why I say human beings are inferior life forms, planarians. Narbril turned a keen glare on Khaziit. It was a cold, piercing stare that made him want to back away from her. The frightened Khaziit gave an order, as though to wipe away his fear. Skeletal dragons, get her. The skeletal dragons kept within range of Khaziit, and made their move. Narbril evaded the attack of one of the skeletal dragons, and moved to close in, but she was forced to avoid the other skeletal dragon's attack and missed her chance. This back and forth played out for quite a while, until a decisive blow was struck. Acid Javelin. Narbril subconsciously turned her head, and avoided the magical javelin headed at her face. That was a grave mistake. The attack would not have done anything even if it had hit, so she could have safely ignored it. However, it came right at her, so she evaded it by reflex. This was a mistake that only a magic caster, who had not improved their close combat ability, would make. That mistake had grave consequences. Whoosh! Narbril's field of view changed dramatically as an ear-splitting impact rang out. She was tossed to the side. She experienced a brief period of weightlessness before falling heavily to the ground. Her left arm had taken a tail sweep from one of the skeletal dragons. The non-stop spinning disoriented her, and she had no idea where she was. Her body was protected by all manner of defensive spells, so there was no pain. However, the two skeletal dragons raised their forelegs over Narbril. One might say she was out of options, normally speaking. Surrender, and I'll spare your life. How about it? A sadistic grin bloomed on Khaziit's face, as he assured himself of his impending victory. Of course, Khaziit was not going to spare her. That look on his face was the kind that looked forward to the girl begging for mercy, before he trampled her pathetic form. Narbril, who had raised her torso off the ground, was so furious that her face was twisted up. Arable, a human. What? Narbril looked Khaziit in the eye and said, "You miserable little human being. How dare you utter such nonsense, you pile of trash." Khaziit's eyes went wide and he shuddered with rage, and he gave the order to finish her off. Destroy her, skeletal dragons. The two dragons raised their forelegs, and Narbril smiled. The words of the man she revered had reached her ears. She would hear him, no matter how far away his voice was. Narbril Gamma. Display the power of Nazarick. Understood. Then, I shall no longer face you as Nabe, but as Narbril Gamma. The skeletal dragons brought their forelegs down, intending to crush Narbril's body beneath their forepaws. At the very last moment, Narbril cast a spell before being reduced to paste. Teleportation. Narbril's field of vision immediately changed. She was now about 500 meters in the air. Without wings to keep her aloft, Narbril plummeted toward the ground. The wind shear roared across her body, and the ground drew close. Narbril laughed, fly. Her rate of descent slowed and then stopped, until Narbril hung in the air, looking down on the battlefield from just now. Khajiit and the two skeletal dragons looked around in shock, as Narbril was nowhere to be found. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit, ha, I'm tired. Clementine's flighty words filtered into Ain's ears. They had been fighting for several minutes, but Ain's greatswords had not once touched Clementine. Speaking of which, that's some amazing physical ability you've got there. You might even be proud of it. But her expression turned into a predatory grin. Are you stupid? You're just swinging your swords with raw strength and speed, wildly swiping around like a kid with a stick. You might have a sword in each hand, but if you don't know how to use them, then sticking to one sword would be wiser. Aren't you taking the warrior business a little too lightly? Come at me, then. Haven't you been doing nothing but dodging since just now? It won't be good for you if you drag this out for too long, no? Ains chuckled coldly as he replied to her. Clementine furrowed her brows. He had her there. Clementine had not attacked Ains. Instead, she had been dodging his attacks, and that was because Ain's extraordinary physical attributes did not give her an opening to attack. Things were not as easy for Clementine as she had claimed. She was beginning to feel angry at herself for not being able to take the initiative and strike. You said no warrior could beat you, right? Where's that confidence of yours fled to? Clementine finally went to her weapons after Ains taunted her. She had 4 of the piercing weapons called stilettos at her waist, as well as a morning star. Right now, she drew one of those stilettos. With his superhuman eyesight, Ains verified that the morning star was covered in detritus that looked like blood and chunks of flesh. Ains tightened his grip on the greatswords in his hands as he stared down Clementine. Just as both sides were about to strike, the earth shook. Ains could not take his eyes away from Clementine, who had taken a fighting stance. He sneaked a glance to the side, and saw that there were 2 gigantic dragon-shaped monsters made of bone where Narbril was fighting. Skeletal dragons, huh? Correct, looks like you do know a thing or two. Yup, they're the bane of any magic caster. I see. So that's why Nabe can't win. Indeed it is, Clementine replied in a mocking tone of voice. She seemed to have regained her composure after the skeletal dragons showed up. Ains furrowed his illusory brows under his helmet. It was true that skeletal dragons were tricky opponents for magic casters, and now there were 2 of them. Narbril as she was now could not possibly beat them. As though sensing the agitation in Ain's heart, Clementine shifted slightly. This was a move that was intended to seal off his movements, so there would probably be a follow-up to it. When one saw a weakness in a powerful opponent, it would be natural to take the chance and attack. Ains cast all thoughts of Narbril from his mind, and thrust forth the greatsword in his left hand in an intimidating manner. It was a feint as he slowly raised the greatsword in his right hand in preparation for a powerful strike. Clementine's weapons were a piercing type, and they could not execute complex attacks like slashing weapons could. They were weapons that were optimized for charges. In addition, stilettos were slender, and were certainly not strong enough to survive a clash with greatswords. Because of that, Ains used his left-hand greatsword to keep her at bay, waiting for Clementine to close in. However, Clementine knew what he was up to. Do you have any way to close this gap? I wonder. Clementine had a smug, self-assured look on her face as she responded in her usual self-assured tone. All of this pointed to the fact that she had something up her sleeve. Clementine slowly changed her posture, lowering herself into what seemed like a runner's crouch. However, her body was still upright, so she looked very strange. It might have appeared comical, but this was definitely not the sort of stance one could take lightly. And then Clementine moved. Before Ain's vigilant eyes, Clementine shot out like a fully compressed spring. She sprinted right at him. It was a charge that even Ains, with his superhuman physical abilities, could hardly believe was possible. Like a hurricane that devoured everything in its path, Clementine closed the distance between them in an instant. She slid under the greatsword Ains was holding out, her physical dexterity allowing her to maintain her full speed as she moved. Ains, who was shaken by Clementine's serpentine movements, forcefully swung his right-hand sword. The powerful stroke ripped through the air as it surged toward Clementine, promising unimaginable devastation if he connected. And in that brief instant, Ains saw the face-splitting grin on her face get even wider. Invulnerable fortress. The unbelievable sight took Ains aback. The slender stiletto had actually blocked a hit from a greatsword that was more than 10 times its mass. The stiletto should have snapped under the grand strike it had just blocked head-on. Even if it had remained intact by some miracle, it would have been knocked flying. However, it was Ain's greatsword which bounced away, like it had struck some ridiculously strong castle wall. As though throwing herself into a lover's embrace, Clementine rushed toward Ain's unguarded chest. In that moment, half of Ain's field of view was taken up by the grinning Clementine. Ains retreated, but his opponent was faster. This attack, which combined a full-tilt charge, all her strength, and skillful use of momentum, could be described as meteoric. There was a flash of light, and then the screeching of metal clashing with metal rang through the graveyard. Clementine ducked the wild swing of Ain's left-hand sword, and then sprang clear. Ains knew the secret behind Clementine's flashy moves. Martial arts, huh? These were techniques which did not exist in Yggdrasil. They could be said to be a warrior's magic, and they were things of which he had to be wary. Its effect seemed to be to defend against his greatsword hit and neutralize the weapon's impact. She must have used martial arts to deflect Ain's attack. So hard, what's that armor of you're made of? Adamantite, HM? Although he did not feel pain, he felt that something sharp had pierced his left shoulder, near the place where he had heard the sound of scraping. Ains glanced to the shoulder from where the impact had come, but there was only a slight dent in the armor. Although the armor had no special magical properties, it was still the product of a level 100 magic caster's spells. The armor's hardness increased with its creator's level, so the fact that there was a dent in the armor was testament to the destructive power of Clementine's strikes. Ah well. If that's the case, next time maybe I should hit somewhere with thinner armor, although I wanted to wear you down bit by bit, then slowly torment you once you couldn't move. What a shame, what a shame. Ains realized that Clementine had not been wildly attacking his shoulders, but aiming to disable his arms in order to render him incapable of attacking. For the first time, Ains felt something like respect toward Clementine the warrior. All Ains could do was simply swing his swords and deal damage to the enemy. Of course, if he could hit at all, the enemy would assuredly be slain. However, against a skilled opponent, he had to carefully consider the flow of the battle. This has been good training for me. Then I'm coming. Just as Ains was admiring Clementine, she took that strange stance she had assumed from just now. In response, Ains raised his right-hand greatsword to meet the attack. This time, however, he did not thrust forth his left-hand greatsword. Clementine snorted at Ains' stance and sprinted. She was so fast that even Ains and his incredible dynamic vision could barely follow her. If she had not rushed straight at him, he might have lost track of her movements. In the face of Clementine's full-tilt charge, like an ominous arrow headed straight at him, Ains swung his right-hand greatsword, launching an attack of his own to intercept her invulnerable fortress. The swing was deflected by the same martial art as before, but he had already predicted this. Ains had lost his balance in the previous exchange because he had put all his strength into the blow, so this time, he did not use as much force. Ains absorbed the radiating impact, as though he had struck a wall, with the strength of his arm, and then he swung his left-hand greatsword. This time, Ains was fully confident that his foe could not block another full-power hit. However, even faster than that, Clementine used another martial art. Flow acceleration. This martial art had a startling effect. It felt as though someone had used time-controlling magic to slow time down. Everything moved slowly, as though immersed in some highly viscous fluid. The speed of Ains' swing slowed to a crawl. However, Clementine moved at the same speed in this decelerated world. She effortlessly dodged Ains' counterattack and approached Ains from the front. This might have been some sort of misperception on Ains' part. The magic rings which Ains wore should have protected him from temporal attacks and attacks designed to impede his freedom of movement, although there might be some unknown factor at work here. He must have felt like she had accelerated all of a sudden, because his battle with Clementine was so intense. The important thing was that Ains had seen this martial art before, but he had not felt the same way back then. Gazef Stronov had used this technique before.